lot of trees that are down.
I had a public meeting one year where I had my neighbors, and I lost power, I didn't have any internet, my whole thing was. Yeah, it was terrifying, so like, I've never been through a real tornado. Like emergency, yeah, it was enough. Never, just like.
The day's only half over.
What
What are you gonna feel like tonight?
How are you?
Well, and a couple of cookies.
I call the General Services Committee meeting to order. Can I get a motion to accept the June meeting minutes as recorded? Moved by Andrea, second by Dick. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. We have one presentation for today. Christy with Alta Planning and Design Incorporated. Christy, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm Christy DiCopo, Alta Planning and Design. I'm here to talk about the Lewis County Rail Trail Master Plan. I'm just going to kind of walk through our team and experience, review our approach briefly, and then we can go through questions and answers as you have them. So as I mentioned, I'm Christy. I'm a principal with Alta Planning and Design. We are a national active transportation firm. We were started in the mid-1990s before active transportation was a thing and before it was cool. This is basically what we do is we focus on pedestrians and bicyclists. Trails and greenways is a huge component of our business. It's something that we all personally feel connected to. We are a very mission-driven company. And so that's one of the reasons that we responded to this RFP is because it's something personally that I love to do is connect people to the places that they ordinarily wouldn't be able to connect to. For our team, we have EDR, Environmental Design Research. They are on our team for environmental services, public engagement, and we work with them a lot. Our styles of producing documents and materials are very similar, and so we have, we are going to be complementing one another throughout the process. And we really see them as an extension of ourselves. They also are local to the community. The project manager on the EDR side is in Watertown. And so she brings a wealth of experience, former DOT employee and a landscape architect. H&T Engineering is a structural engineering firm. The owners of that firm, I worked with them for over a decade side by side. They have over 45 years of experience in structural engineering. They have a tremendous amount of railroad structures experience, which is super important for a rail trail project like this, where the bridges are primarily railroad type, not necessarily highway. So there are some big differences there. And then Albertine Courier, who is our sub-consultant for survey services, should we want to engage them at any time. So just a little bit about me and the project management style that I have. At least for this project, I really think that there's three things that are super important. It's effective communication, so that means frequent communication, open, honest. I can't stress it enough. I stress it with my teams all the time. If we're not talking, then we got a bigger problem. So talking and communicating, whether it's in written or verbal form, is super important. Informed data processing. You all have a lot of decisions to make in front of you on any given day. And without having the data that you need in order to make informed decisions, it's kind of like flying without having eyes. It's really important to be able to know exactly what you're dealing with, to be able to make decisions that are based in data and based in sound judgment. Active listening and problem solving. I feel like all I am is a problem solver. That's what I do every day with my kids, my house, my job. It's like every day I walk in and I got another problem. But the key piece of that is active listening. And so when we talk about this project in particular, public engagement is a huge component of this. It will be a critical piece to making sure that whatever comes out of the Rail Trail Master Plan really reflects what the community's needs and desires are, and it mitigates any concerns there are, and it also capitalizes on the opportunities that may not be apparent right now, but as we get through the process, they start to reveal themselves. Project phasing is another critical component that we're super focused on, primarily because it comes down to the money. If the phasing isn't right, then the projects won't be appropriately sized for grant opportunities. It will be really difficult to implement the project long-term down the road. Year-round benefits, you all are in a very unique location where you've got a nice amount of snow, you've got water, you've got green, lush landscapes. Capitalizing on that also means getting opportunities for additional interest and excitement around the trail, and also additional year-round influx of opportunities for people to use it and to benefit from it. So really making sure that those year-round benefits are capitalized on will help even with the funding piece. And that's why funding is at the end, because without any of the money and having an implementable plan, it'll be really difficult to bring something to fruition. So when we talk about public engagement, I can't stress enough how critical it is for success. We have a variety of tools that we would like to be using throughout this project: pop-up events, steering committee events, interactive workshops, you name it. And because this rail trail is so long and the land use context around the rail trail is so varied, it's not a one-size-all approach for dealing and working with the public. We also really want to make sure that we understand and provide an avenue for everyone's voice to be heard. That can be really challenging in traditional, like, open house settings, where people come in and maybe you get one person that is really vocal but may not be expressing the opinions of the majority of the group. So through this engagement process, we really want to be able to gather information that helps steer the master plan in a direction that reflects the desires of the community. This is just an example of one of the tools that we could use. It's a traveling idea board, especially when we have meetings that are going to be throughout locations all along the rail trail. That board can be brought along, ideas added to it. The people that are now seeing the idea board for the first time can see all the ideas and concerns and excitement and opportunities presented or written down from prior times. So this may be something that we implement across the board. This picture is actually on these placemats that I brought for all of you. This is Semiscott Orchards in Kinderhook, New York. It's right along the Albany Hudson Electric Trail, which you can see the asphalt paved path in the background. We envision having similar experiences here, which we've had all across the country, but I bring this example to you all because this is unique. Their operations are focused on vegetables and fruit harvesting, but they also have a really robust pick-your-own operation where the public is involved. So it's not only dealing with the operations of the business itself, but then it's dealing with all of the visitors that come to capitalize on these pick-your-own events. So our trail solutions here had to be different than the farm down the road, who was really focused on cattle grazing and dairy production and didn't have the public involved at all. You know, there's nobody coming from the outside in. So we've been through this before. We understand that there's going to be concerns even about crossing between one farm and another. So that public engagement piece is going to be super critical to make sure that we fully understand what the issues exactly are and the best approach to mitigate any of those concerns. The other piece that can be linear from A to B. Yes, that's a trail, but the trail experience changes it from being just, okay, I'm going to get on and I'm going to travel 3 miles and then I'm going to get off, to, oh my goodness, here's this thing, an interpretive panel that tells me a little bit about it, or the color coding of the branding. On the lower right picture, that's CB Link. They use colors to tell you the direction that you're traveling. One color is for northbound, another color is southbound. It may seem like a minute detail, but that tiny little detail will make a huge difference. The Rail Trail Master Plan will focus on bringing out some of those elements to make sure that from all the way in Lowellville to Carthage, the experience is the same throughout. Doesn't matter where you get on or get off, you know that you're on the Lewis County Rail Trail. Sorry about that. Prior to, one of the things that we will use when we talk about phasing and constructability, we will use a variety of desktop resources for our analysis and also in-field services. We have planned to do a decent amount of field inspection, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But beforehand, we know that green infrastructure was an element that there was some interest from the county on that. So we did some desktop review to understand where those opportunities may present themselves. We also have classified all of the intersections. We looked at all of the crossings and classified them for high complexity, medium, and low complexity. That tells us what are we dealing with? Who do we need to coordinate with to understand what these crossings may look like? And what is that typology as you go through the intersection? Are they going to be more of an urban style, or is it going to just be a crossing with pavement markings? This is the southern section that's already built. We have taken a look at this section. We know kind of what you're starting from, and the master plan will be able to build on that. Looking at the northern section, it's a little bit more complex. There are 15 bridges and culverts. When I say bridges and culverts, it's anything that's crossing some form of water or some airspace. Just doing the desktop review isn't enough, because when we look at them, we're seeing, yes, this traverses a space and time, but it doesn't tell us what the condition of that element is. So we do have time to go in the field and take a look at those things. There are 24 intersections, 6 of them are complex. And when we say complex, it's most likely due to the skew of how the trail crosses the existing roadway. So we will be taking a look at all of these elements in greater detail. These are just some kind of pictures just to kind of illustrate what we're dealing with, which I know you all know, but some of these crossings are pretty skewed.
Hey, Christy.
Yeah.
Maybe we can switch mics here.
Oh, is it getting a lot of feedback?
But just move it back. If
Okay.
everyone can hear fine without it, that's
Okay.
fine. I don't know why it's feeding back so much.
That's okay,
Doesn't
sorry.
happen.
I know I talk kind of loud.
Okay, yeah, I think that one.
So when we talk about the structures, I mentioned to you that we identified a minimum of 22. There may be more out there that we can't see from aerial imagery. The importance of the structures is that 9 times out of 10, they're at the beginning of or shortly thereafter of an access point. So if the structure is in not good condition, what that means for you all is that you have to deal with it sooner rather than later in order to build the next segment of trail behind it. When we're looking for data, when we're going to do the data collection, the things that we're looking for is the structural repairs, what is needed to bring it up to be able to handle the loading that we know we need to get, and then also how does that affect construction phasing and constructability. The structural repairs could be anything from on the superstructure, so that's the steel above it, could also be railings, could be the substructure, which is the abutments, the integral abutments or the piers. And then below that is the hydraulic and scour concerns. We will be looking to understand, are any one of these three things in disrepair, and how far in disrepair are they? Because that ultimately comes down to money. How much money is it going to take to be able to fix these? And then again, I mentioned the constructability and phasing. We have identified access points already, but there's more information that needs to be gathered to really have a true picture of what segments can be built at what time. And when we talk about the rail trail master plan, really what we're talking about pulling together is a document that really showcases how this becomes more than just a trail. It becomes an economic driver. These pictures that you're seeing of Swamp Rabbit, it's an awful name, but they love it apparently. They have, all kinds of events that surround this trail, and it really has become an economic driver within the community. Maybe there's some feedback from the laptop. I don't know. We know that you all have gone through some logo and branding development before. That is all to you, whether you want to engage in that process or not. But really, again, it comes down to this vision of having a facility that becomes a staple in the community and can provide health benefits for recreation and activity, but also bring in businesses that want to be located around the rail trail. These are just some examples of health benefit, economic benefit analyses that we've done in the past. We have tons of examples all across the country where the economic benefits are really clear. People want to move near rail trails for the benefits that they provide, both in property value and for health and recreation. And again, just wrapping up about the funding, there's a lot of funding opportunities out there. Never has there been this much funding available for active transportation before. When you couple that with green infrastructure, this project is really ripe for getting a variety of grant sources. but you need to show some movement and you need to show something that's buildable and implementable. And so that's where the Rail Trail Master Plan comes in. We're not building anything with the Rail Trail Master Plan, you're just setting the framework for what could that look like in the future to go and get that funding as the county feels ready and prepared to do so. And just finally, I'll leave you with this. This is the NINA paper plant, an employer in the area. This is not an example of what NINA will be someday, but it's an example of thinking about the future and what could be. You know, this is an opportunity to gather everyone. You get out of work at the end of the day and you go and you have a drink with your friends, you meet your partner or your spouse, your kids, and you go for a bike ride or you go just for a short walk. It doesn't even have to be that long. But it's really about a vision of community and gathering to be able to come together and have a space that is safe and fun and enjoyable, that everybody can really enjoy throughout the county. We talk about year-round benefit. Again, the more opportunities you can get for users on the trail, the more money it brings in, the more excitement you get, and it kind of just builds from there. So with that, I think I'm a little over, but that's kind of the short version of how we envision the Rail Trail Master Plan from the Alta perspective.
You said there was 22 structures.
Yes.
What are those structures? Are they all bridges or are they?
There's a
what are they?
variety. So they could be large culverts. Large culverts are defined as anything over a certain span length with concrete head walls on them. It's really hard to tell from the aerial imagery exactly what they are, but it's clear that there's some water passing through them. If it's just a culvert, no big deal, right? Maybe the culvert's in good condition and it's not an issue. But if they are short span structures and the timber decking is failing, or the rails have put excess strain on the head walls, then it's no longer simple, because now you're dealing with what are those repairs going to be?
Do you have an open mind as to what uses could be?
Absolutely, yes. And here's the reason why. In Loudon, where things are a little bit more populated, there's actually those two tracks that kind of run side by side. This image doesn't really share it that well, but in that southern section, you may want to have one piece be completely non-motorized, just straight up stone dust, walking and biking. And then on the separate track or the separate piece of right of way, you may want to keep the rails in place and do like a biking, they have that up near Warrensburg where the bikes are on the rails themselves. You could change it and make it be exclusively concrete. There's a wide variety of opportunities. It really just comes down to what makes the most sense.
Will your team actually walk the trails? The
Yes.
rails or
So that's, yeah, and there's a lot of distance to cover. So one of the things that we were hoping to do is to use either UTVs or ATVs so we can make up faster ground. But that's up to the county if we're going to be allowed to be on the parcels to do that. If we can't use the ATVs to get from, throughout the segments, what we'll probably do is divide and conquer. We'll walk in, we'll take our bikes if we can. And it really depends on the conditions of the bridges. If we can get over the bridges, then we'll take our bikes and we'll ride as far as we can. We do have the ability to use drones if we need to, but we prefer not to use them because there's no substitute for rides, essentially.
So in your study of this, there might be, when you really look at what's out there might be situations where walking is the only alternative.
That's correct. Yeah,
And motorized is a great alternative,
that's correct. Yeah.
but not one size fits all.
Yeah.
What's the last one you guys worked on?
I'm working currently on the Sullivan ONW Rail Trail in Sullivan County. Some of our teammates are working on the Atlanta Beltline. I briefly worked on it. Can't really say that it's mine, but that's down in Atlanta. That's a beltline that goes all around the city of Atlanta. I have the Parkland Trail, which I'm currently working on. We just submitted 90% Friday night, way too late. That's in Washington, the state, Parkland, Washington. So we have several across the country that we're working on. Empire State Trail, 750 miles. I finished that in 2020. The Kingston Rail Trail, we worked on that in 2018. So we have too many to.
Aren't you also working, or did you just recently finish the one in the Adirondack?
Yeah, so the Adirondack Rail Trail, I did that with my former company. So that design was mine, and then I left and I went to the Thruway Authority. So I had to give it up. I don't work for that company anymore. But yes, that's when I was a project engineer, so the design was not, I was not the project engineer.
What would be your timeline?
The RFP calls for a year. It's aggressive. The public engagement piece is really important, and it's gonna drive a lot of this. The farming community, our thought is that reaching out to them would be best in winter months outside the harvest. But we're planning, our schedule right now is to go through the full year.
What kind of success have you had with grant writing? I know you mentioned the amount of money that's available.
Yes, so our company alone, not including our sub-consultants, we have gathered over $845 million in funding for communities that have solicited our service or grant writing services. We have a dedicated team for grant writing. We actually just won the Coosta Rail Trail when I was here last time, and we mentioned that. They actually got 2 federal grants, which we confirmed that wasn't a mistake. It kind of was a mistake, but then the feds said, okay, well, we're gonna let it slide. They got $45 million for that Coosta Rail Trail in North Carolina. Yeah, and that's from a Grace grant, but we wrote those grants. I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, we've helped, like the Sullivan O&W, we've helped them write their grants. They've taken the ownership on to write it themselves. And they made it to the 3rd round this last time with the Race grants. I think had we could we have written it, we probably would have gotten a little bit further. But they are super competitive, so you've got to know the ins and outs, and because we do them all across the country and they're federal grants, I mean, we're in a unique position for that.
Why do you think there is so much money available? Like,
Well,
is it
Pete
kind of like-
Buttigieg, I can't say his last name, our Secretary of Transportation is a big proponent of active transportation, so he's pushing. We also learned from the pandemic that recreation and access to outside resources is super important. Being inside and sitting at a desk all day is, I mean, we have to do it for our jobs, but at the end of the day, people need a way to connect to nature. And so I think the pandemic really taught us a lot about our habits as individuals and our needs to be able to be living a healthier lifestyle. You know, the Sullivan O&W, and I know you all in Lewis County have some of the worst health statistics in New York State. And so part of building the momentum around this is that if you can get people living a more active lifestyle, that decreases your healthcare costs, which means it decreases your social security costs, and it kind of like filters out. And I think it's really about looking at the big picture.
Do you factor public safety into your
100%. I am a woman with 3 young kids, and I can tell you that there are sections of trails I will not go on because I don't feel safe, because they were not designed with that in mind. And public safety doesn't only mean the user, but it also means, on the flip side, emergency services. How do they get to someone if they've fallen? How do they get to someone if, you know, they've run into an issue? And also, it's like graffiti. I hate to say it, but that's a real thing. Graffiti is a problem. We've had instances on the Empire State Trail of people tagging signs. Our signs, this is the logo for the Empire State Trail, but our signs have an anti-graffiti coating on it, so it's pretty simple that you go out there and you're able to wipe it off and clean it up relatively easily.
Well, the factor of getting emergency vehicles or people to it
Yes.
is what I was alluding to mainly.
Yeah, and it's super important. That's where the bridge is. So a lot of times people say, oh, I got a bridge. How much could a one person on a bike or walking take? No big deal. But it is a big deal because you've got to be able to get one for construction so that you don't have to go 2 miles one way in and 2 miles out. Then the second part is when the trail is implemented, you need to be able to get a fire, well, not necessarily a fire truck, but an ambulance on there. So we always design our pedestrian bridges to the HL 93 live loading, which is standard for a pedestrian bridge, and it accommodates the emergency service vehicles.
Is grant writing a separate issue with you, or is that part of the current package?
The current package does not include grant writing, but what it does include is the phasing the projects, like a project prioritization. So breaking down the full length of the trail into sizable chunks that the county could feel like they could take on in an order that makes the most sense for the grant funding opportunities. So does not include the actual writing itself, because the grants also change from year to year. Sometimes you can have a CFA application come out and it's right for a section that you have, and other times the solicitations come out and you don't have anything that really kind of matches the criteria that's on the table for that session, for that round.
I think you've been through this before.
Well, yes, but every situation is different. Your rail trail is not the same as the Sullivan O&W. It's not the same as the Beltline. It's not the same as CD Link. It has its own identity. And so, yes, I've been through it before, but every time we go through this, it's like, it's a new experience and we're gonna find new challenges, but we draw from all that experience to be able to kind of get through this in one piece.
In this particular project, how many people would be involved in the team?
There's a lot. I mean, I'm the face. You will see me more than anything else, but on my own Alta team, I think I have 10 right now. That's behind me,
Right.
doing a variety of things. On EDR's team, I think we have 5, H&T has 4, roughly. I'm giving you rough numbers just based on the org charts and how we did our budget. So you're talking probably not all at one time, obviously. We have specialty areas, like our planners on the Alta side will be involved early and upfront. And then there'll be a select few that continue throughout, but as we develop our 30% design package, then the engineers take over. And so it's like a team swap, you're dealing with engineers versus the planners.
You mentioned the public outreach, which is obviously very important.
Yes.
How often do you visualize that?
Well, right now we have it planned. We will have some sort of public engagement activity throughout the duration of the project. There will be short bursts of time where we're preparing for, say, an open house or a steering committee meeting or a legislative meeting possibly. We also are scoped to do the town meetings, for each of the towns that are involved. So, I can't give you exactly, I do have my schedule here, but I don't know.
About is good enough.
Yeah, I think, I think we're gonna see a big burst in the beginning as we kick things off, because we need to know what are people's upfront hesitations or opportunities. Then we'll come back and we'll probably revisit those opportunities and share with everybody the progress that we've made. What are the existing conditions that we've identified? And how does that shape things? And then it's again, like a third time at the end for, okay, now we've heard you, we've implemented some things. Here's what we think the final product is. Did we get it right? And so that's the last.
So, in some form of a meeting, would you say monthly?
Yes, for sure. I mean, we are scoped to have monthly meetings with the county. That's our internal meetings. Those are progress meetings. I wouldn't necessarily consider that public engagement, but the county does have an obligation to be that two-way conduit to share information back. We also have stakeholder meetings, which are offset from our steering committee meetings, like the stakeholder meetings are offset from our public engagement meetings. So you're gonna have a touch point probably about once a month, at most once every 2 months, but I don't think it'll go that long. We don't have a lot of time, we have 12 months, so, we've gotta move when it comes to connecting.
I like the fact that you would go to the towns as well,
Yes,
the town meetings.
well, because I think the towns, no offense to the county, but you are the counties, and the towns may have their own opinion and ideas of what's important to them, which may or may not be in alignment with the county. I mean, that's just a fact of multi-tiered government. So it's important that they have an opportunity to speak out as a governmental agency. And also, we need to recognize that they may or may not take on responsibility for portions of the trail after it gets built. So it's on them to understand what is that commitment that they're also engaging in. Just because the county says it needs to be so, there's fiscal responsibilities that each municipality has that they have to face as well. So that's why, that the town meetings are important for that reason as well.
My time is done.
Okay. Thank you for all your questions. I hope I didn't.
Any other questions from committee members?
Thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And I'm happy, as we depart today, if you have questions or thoughts or ideas, my email is always open. You can always call. I'm happy to. I love this business. I love connecting people to what we have here in nature. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Thank you very much, Christy.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Thank you.
So we will move on to our dockets now. welcome to stick around, but don't
Okay, I'm gonna try to be
It gets a
quiet.
lot more than
The first one is authorizing 5-year agreement between County of Lewis and Unified Court System for court cleaning and minor repair services at a cost of $114,639 for the first year, which is April 1st, 2023 through March 31st, 2024.
Any discussion?
Is that amount there, Brian, is that the starting point, and we're gonna negotiate each year after that, but it would be no lower than this?
Joan, can you?
I can try that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that, I believe that's for the first year. Every year, Matt O'Connor, if he's here or not, submits a budget to the state court system. They approve it every year, so it will vary, generally within a $10,000 range of that, but it varies every year, and the state approves it every year.
I would think that it would be at least this much.
It could be lower if Matt's got less on the, project list.
When I put together the budget, I estimate costs for, cleaning services and other things that we do over there. When basically I put that budget together and then I have to justify it for the next year to be able to get that. So it won't be any higher than that amount, but it'll be very close to that amount. Because I have to justify and prove to them that's the money that we spent there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Thanks for that. Good question, Phil. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing a change order to the agreement with Betty and Crane for the DSS building renovation under the facilities improvement projects in the amount of $22,958 for changing door handles to panic bars and adding a handicapped accessible door opener.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing the extension of KT Construction and Consulting Company agreement on a monthly basis commencing December 1st, 2023 until the county determines final closeout of their services at a monthly compensation rate of $21,305 and authorizing lump sum payment for past and future additional professional services in the amount of $14,025.
Any discussion? Ryan, how many more months do you think we anticipate?
We're hoping, February to March by the time you get project closeout, so construction will be done. But getting the as-built together is very important. We have not traditionally had great as-built of our county buildings. So this time we want to make sure that what was put inside the walls is actually reflected in our final documents that we have. And we want these guys to stick with us through that closeout process.
I think they've been very, very valuable having their expertise and their regular reports. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Pursuant to local law number 2-2007, finding and determining that an unsafe structure shall be demolished and removed to set hearing for final order, property located at 6314 East Main Street in the Village of Turin, owned by Ignacio Humada.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing Lewis County Fire Coordinator to form a countywide fire police task force from trained volunteers in the county to perform the duties to secure and protect emergency responders, firefighters, and the general public around emergency scenes and fire ground operations, including but not limited to temporary restriction of road use, rerouting of traffic, and general guidance and safety.
Any discussion?
Yeah. Why are you chuckling like that? Bob, have you got prospective people?
Excuse me?
Have you got prospective people to do this?
Indeed, we do. We've got a force right now of about 14 volunteers and 1 volunteer for the fire police task force.
Great. Is there certain training for this?
There is. They have to take the newest 27-hour course, plus they need to take emergency vehicle operations course.
And the last question I had was, do we insure these people? I mean,
We do. It's no different than the way we insure our hazmat team. It's a group of individuals from various fire departments that come in to perform service, in the case of the hazmat team, to do decon for a hazardous material situation. And in this case, it's going to be to safeguard the firefighters and or events such as the Lewis County Fair Parade.
okay, thanks, Bob.
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Bob, another question, please.
Sure.
Most of the departments have fire police within their own departments now. And how does this make up with that?
So what it does is it doesn't excuse or delay anybody from doing their normal fire police duties within their respective department. It's when you have multiple intersections to cover, instead of paging out the next department to help cover that intersection and getting a fire truck, a rescue, 2 chiefs and possibly untrained individuals, you're getting just the fire police. All fire chiefs are notified, the same as the regular fire police that are a part of this association or part of this group. And when they get notified, the fire chief will have a notification that his fire police are going out and they're going to be covering XYZ intersection.
And you make that decision then at your level?
No, it's made at the command level of whatever the situation is.
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Bob. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Appropriating funds in the amount of $222,600 to the county road accounts for additional revenue from New York State CHIPS program.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing agreement between County of Lewis on behalf of Lewis County Highway Department and Barton and Lejudas for design and bidding professional services, and to send out an RFP for the 2024 culvert replacement project on Pine Grove Road for $35,800.
Any discussion? Okay. Just point out this is next year, so. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing supplemental agreement number 1 between Lewis County Highway Department and Barton and Lejudas for County Road 21 over Gulf Stream to provide additional engineering services for the design and construction phases regarding the bridge replacement project at an additional amount not to exceed $240,000.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Authorizing supplemental agreement number 2 to the contract between New York State Department of Transportation and Lewis County for the Transportation Federal Aid Bridge Replacement Project known as County Road 21 over Gulf Stream for the final design phase funding of the project.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Awarding bid and authorizing an agreement between the County of Lewis and Alta Planning Plus Design for professional design, consultation, and engineering services and completing a rail trail master plan in accordance with the specifications and requirements set forth in the RFP, and all tasks and scope of services with a final version to be completed within 12 months from commencement at a cost not to exceed $579,560.
Any discussion? So, I think, this is a professional service, so we have some flexibility with it. At least from my look at this presentation versus some of the other ones, I think these folks are clearly the most qualified, the most experienced, getting the best result for the money that we're looking to spend on this. And I'm really interested to see what grant writing opportunities there would be after the design and presentation plan is complete. But, obviously she gave us a lot of information there. I wonder if a year is too, she mentioned that's an aggressive schedule. Is that, I don't know if that's something we want to take another look at, give them a little bit more time if they need it. We want
Well,
to
we
make
could
sure.
always put some flexibility in the contract to allow for extensions.
And that might be something 6 months in that you want to extend it out further.
Extensions in time, but not money.
Right.
Correct.
we're gonna wanna time this, with the purchase, right? So, we obviously haven't closed on the property yet. I've talked to Christie about, what that looks like in terms of, their planning. We don't want to get too far in before we actually, close on the property and own it, right? So they're not gonna do a whole lot until we have the deed in hand, that way we're not, spending money for something. If something goes wrong, we don't acquire the property, then, we wouldn't have spent money involved. So we'll make sure that timing is lined up properly. The other thing that I think is important to mention is we have applied for a federal DOT planning grant for $270,000. We've been successful with those in the past. We've been successful getting that grant for our Complete Streets master plan that we're working on. So Cassie and her team have applied for that, so that could cover part of the cost.
Of this, the actual.
Of the, all of it.
Any other thoughts? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Amending compensation with reference to the sheriff's office by creating one dispatch corrections officer working supervisor that is permanent, full-time at grade 20 with a salary range of $23.31 to $25.56 due to the impending retirement of the current 911 operations coordinator.
Any discussion? We certainly wish Cheryl the best and thank you for service to the county. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. I see we have no motions. We do have an executive committee on the agenda. Executive session to discuss personnel matter regarding to employees. I think we're going to push this off until finance and rules, if I
At
understand.
the end of those meetings.
Okay.
Because we'll have another executive session on negotiations.
We'll just do it all together.
All right. In that case, is there any other questions or things to bring up for the general services committee?
I wanted to ask the sheriff a question.
Sure about that, Bill?
Yeah. I'm not sure about the answer, but I have a question. On your report, you had 8 instances of executions requiring enforcement action. What's an
That
example?
doesn't mean execution like you're thinking, sir.
But what is it? It was interesting terminology, but what is an example of that?
That's the civil laws.
That'd be like
Yes.
All right.
warrants of eviction, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I thought probably, but execution's kind of scary. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I just want to comment on the Pine Grove Road.
Please do.
It still hasn't been sealed. However, it's been swept. After our meeting on Tuesday, they were there Thursday, Friday, and Monday sweeping, cleaning up yards and sweeping driveways. And we all appreciate that. And the only reason I knew it should be swept before it was sealed is because Tim had a conversation with me and Ryan. We went for a ride. And I know Tim would never steer me wrong, so, and I don't want to pat on the back for being right, I just want you to know how this road is going, and it does look better.
Okay, I was gonna ask if it's like.
Did that older gentleman get helped as well? That came.
Yes, everybody has been.
He's actually next door neighbors with Tom.
Tom,
I chatted
yeah.
with Tom and asked
Mhm.
Tom if they had been to that gentleman's house, and they said they had.
So I'm very pleased with it, and I think most people are, and thankful for what's been done. Thank you.
Thanks for reporting on that, Andrew.
Ian, before we adjourn, in my office before the meeting, there was some folks coming in and out asking about storm flooding with some of the bridges. Tim, would you mind just giving a brief update on a couple of the bridges?
Sure. So 2 town bridges were impacted pretty severely. The Bailey Road Bridge in the town of Watson, which is that town bridge that we secured Bridge New York funding for. It actually washed out the road beyond the bridge pretty significantly. And the bridge it's got a weight limit on it, so we're not really sure how to get gravel over it to repair the road. We're meeting out there, Bob and I, and the town highway superintendent and Hardin Judas engineers are going to be out there tomorrow morning to evaluate the damage to that structure. We're also hoping potentially that there could be FEMA mitigation money to help us with the ultimate repair or replacement of that bridge. And then the same thing in the town of Gregg on the Eatonville Road Bridge, there was some significant flooding on that road as well. So we're gonna take and do some evaluations. I'm also contacting the state DOT. They've sent out a team to evaluate there's 35 bridges that were impacted by the flooding. And they're inspecting all of them, and I've gotten 2 back so far that have scour damage or some sort of washout damage. So,
Thank you, Tim. Anything else? If not, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Right here.
Moved by Phil, seconded by Dick. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. The meeting is now adjourned.
Very anxious to hear about that.
I just make a motion to approve the June 20th committee meetings, if no amendments. Second. Discussion? All those in favor, aye? Opposed, nay? Okay. And then for presentations, we have Deanna Edict to talk about youth bureau bylaws. Riveting.
She's riveted too.
So today I wanted to just briefly review some of the proposed revisions of the bylaws that we're looking at for the youth bureau. Since I took over in March of 2021, we're really struggling with attendance. And as we struggle with attendance, we can't reach quorum, which we can't get quorum to allocate the monies timely to our programs. So back in January, I asked for some legal advice and also contacted other counties in addition to OCFS representatives. They gave a suggestion, look at reducing the numbers to get the quorum. So that's the majority of the proposed revisions to the bylaws. Everybody's got a copy. So you can see the red is what we're gonna add to the bylaws. So the first section, just changing purpose to goals. We've added a few additional goals. After reviewing some of the other counties, I think I reviewed 6 bylaws from other counties. So I pulled some of their language out of their bylaws that I thought were applicable to ours. I think the main issue that we have to address is obviously Article 3 membership. Regulation says we have to have 11 members. I want to change it to no more than 13 to keep the membership down so that we can meet quorum. On a regular basis, I get maybe 5 or 6 people to attend meetings. Still at 11, obviously I'm still just there to give enough people at the meetings to get quorum. So. The rest of it, under Article 5, Section 3 is really about attendance. I have a few members that have not attended any meeting in the last year. So I really want something in there, and the board is really, they don't want to be the bad person to vote somebody off. So I thought if we could change it to a member shall forfeit their membership following a third unexcused absence. So as long as they let us know that they can't attend, that's fine. But if they just don't show up, I think we need something in there to move it along. Meetings, we just changed it. Some new language in there, not less than 4 times a year. I assume that we're gonna meet every other month, but 4 times a year at a minimum. The other sections that are changing, the committees, we really don't use committees. And then the last section, the process for applying for OCFS funds, that is constantly changing. So I don't want that in the bylaws because I will have to change it every time OCFS changes the process.
And you could just have something general in there that you're going to follow the,
OCFS process.
Yeah.
And the last section are just some expectations about what your responsibilities about being on a board and specifically our youth bureau board.
So, just so the committee knows that Deanna did reach out to me a while ago for my legal input when she was really having trouble with members of the board not showing up, not having a quorum, and not being able to do anything. So it's certainly not unheard of for boards to go down in size in order to deal with the reality of how many people are showing up and participating and being able to take any action based upon the requirement of the quorum. So That was my opinion back to Deanna when she asked.
And we've tried different things, we tried changing the date, we tried changing the time, we've done virtual, we've done a combination hybrid, and I still get the same people that show up. And it's usually 5 to 6 people.
Do your members, what's the ratio like for youth versus adults?
Right now, it's about half, and that's one of the things that I want to change in here. You'll see under membership. Currently, the way it is we're supposed to have 2 students from every school district, so that puts me at 10 already, 10 members. So I would prefer it just read including 2 students. Our regulations don't require students to be on the board. It just says that they shall have representation. So I think we would be good with just 2.
What do other counties do, similar to these numbers?
Yep, other counties, the ones that I reviewed, all had just two students.
How many active students do you have?
Currently, right now, it was really just 1.
Yeah.
And he graduated this year, so.
The third unexcused absence, is that consecutive absences or total or?
We haven't really talked about it, but my interpretation would be when they get their third unexcused, that would be forfeit the membership.
In a row or?
In a year.
Oh, in a year, okay.
Yep.
That's pretty good. Anyone else have any questions for Deanna? So you'll take us to.
Yes, our meeting, actually it got rescheduled because we didn't have enough people to show up for the 21st. And now it's scheduled for the 28th, hopefully. And at that time, we'll present it and see if we can get a motion to amend it. All right,
Sounds good, thank you.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Next is just a discussion, not really a presentation, about where we are at with supportive housing. We have been actively looking for other sites besides the Stowe Street site. Though it's I would say there's 2 other ones, but very preliminary. So I not even engineers have even been involved at this point. Tops, the people who own Tops Plaza were contacted about some of their property that is for sale. And it was just a flat out no, just no interest in selling it at this time. Sounds like to anybody for any reason. Just sort of disappointing in my opinion that, that just is vacant. And then the other 2 sites, just very preliminary, we have to, once the owners would be agreeable to selling, then engineers to see if it would even be feasible to put the housing on those sites. So the next part of the discussion is we recently, last week, went up to Ogdenburg, a group of us, to look at a supportive housing site that they did. And they actually, it's not by any government, they had a grassroots organization called Step by Step that initiated the housing. They bought an old school for $15,000 actually, right in downtown Ogdensburg. It was an old elementary school, I think, and they, after they bought it, they were able to secure the grants, same type of grants that we are pursuing for the renovation and for the operating costs. And they house 19 or 20, I think they have 1 unit that's not up right now. And it was very impressive what they've done there. Beautiful building. Actually, I have the video, if you want to do the video of it. Yep. So this is a very, housing. They also, there's a few pictures as well. So this is a large common area that they had. It used to be their gym, and this was a very, very impressive space, wide open. And if you kind of look around, they had all of these knickknacks and antiques. It is just a wonderful, and it's wonderfully taken care of. Everything there is, it's been operating for a year. Everything still looks brand new. Everything is clean and in order and comfortable, and it just was a very impressive space. And then I think the next two pictures are of the actual apartments. There's one bedrooms, and I think the other ones are kind of efficiency, wide open like this. And all their furniture, they ended up going with Amish made furniture, just because it's sturdier, it's heavy, and they've had only one apartment that was damaged since then. But other than that, they haven't had any real kind of damage to the furniture or the anything around there. They had a cook when it first opened up for a few months who would cook meals for everybody who lived there, but they found that people would prefer to cook for themselves. And so that they were able to kind of help people transition and have that available for them. And that really goes back to everything that we know about this population and what Jalen talks about all the time, is that people don't want to live in a place where they have no control over their timeline and their lives. They want to be independent. They need, but there are people who need this stepping stone to get back to being able to live independently. What else do you want to say about the Ogden trip? Jenny, Jalen, Ryan?
So they had, similar model to what we've been talking about, right? So Lisa mentioned the funding. They're funded by the HHAP capital grant, which is the same funding that we have targeted. That's for the upfront costs. The maintenance costs are also part of a state program that's ESHI funding that actually Snowbelt has already been awarded for a project should it get built. It's $25,000 per unit per year. That helps maintain this facility in the condition, as you can tell, that it is, which is very nice. They have staffing on site 24/7. There's a front desk there. People have to check in and out. It is secure. In fact, it was interesting to hear the staff talk about safety. It's more, they said, the front desk and the security was really more about protecting the folks that are on the inside from other parts of their life, people that, might want to get a hold of them that had been bad influences in the past, those types of things. So more about protecting the people on the inside, they found really than, the people that are living there in terms of a threat to the community. They had a lot of opposition in the community. They told us all about it. It took them over a year. They had to go to federal court, in fact, because the city had not, sided in their favor on a land use issue, and the city lost.
And they were awarded $150,000 from the city because it was, discriminatory with how they were choosing to not allow, this housing to be developed there.
The one or two shots, is that right in the neighborhood of like houses across the street?
Very, very.
There, adjacent to this property is probably 45 homes compared to one of the sites that we've talked about is adjacent, like 2 homes. So this is much more centrally located. than any of the sites that we had looked at here in Lewis County. But, you know, we went, we walked around the place, I mean, people were going in and out, living their lives. It didn't seem to disrupt the neighborhood really in any way.
They did say that they had one vocal opponent to the project, and now that person, a neighbor, comes over and, helps with landscaping and the gardening, because they did realize that this is great for community. What would, this area really benefited from this. And like they said in the video, it takes the strain off emergency services. Jalen, do you wanna, I'm sure you have something to add for us.
Just want to fill in a couple, TLS in partnership with us got awarded the DSHI, so I just wanted to, don't forget Maureen in this process. A couple of the details that they went over with programming, and I work with Step by Step closely in the continuum of care for our Tri-County area, so we can share those programming documents too. Their tenant selection, it does restrict sex offenders, it is for local residents only. Their selection process does take a couple of months. The person has to be willing to participate in their treatment goals, so that $25,000 per unit funding sounds like a lot for rent. This covers supported services, the operating costs of the building, the roof, the preventative maintenance, the staff that's required on site, along with the accounting, administration, report writing. All of those things are included in that budget. So you really have to do the property budget out of that total cost. They did say that they have one person come in as a hospital discharge. I know I briefly mentioned that a lot of severe persistent mental illness starts appearing between 18 and 24, which is that 50% occupancy that we selected. Sorry. So a lady came in discharged from the hospital, and she stayed there for 6 months until she could get into the college dorm rooms, and now she's living successfully independently. I think there's a lot of those stories. A lot of them, I think 4 units were currently working, and there's a couple more that had goals to regain employment. Each zone in the building is secured by passes, so you can't get there unless you live on that section. They are inspected weekly by staff to make sure they're not deteriorating. All guests have to sign in at the front desk, and you can't leave the front corridor without a pass, so you can't even get to the community room. And then to the point where there's all cameras, so even if that guest wants to see another tenant, the tenant has to escort them any of the common areas and bring them back down to sign them in to another guest. They said they thought they were gonna get a lot of resistance from the tenants, but like Ryan said, it actually protects them, and they're like, oh, it's the rules, we can't allow guests in and they can't stay overnight. So it can't be that congregate place, I think there are some concerns about what do you do when you condense all these populations together and how do you keep them safe? So I think that was considered. Step by Step is a grassroots. They do have a drop-in center there that's open to the public. There's community rooms. They put on plays for the public. I think the property manager got a little too excited on that project, but it was, she said she put out 40 chairs because she was worried about all the resistance in the area and nobody's gonna wanna support them, and she didn't want them to feel bad. She was like, oh, I was just gonna put 10 in. Ended up being standing room only. There was kids, families, adults that came there. They had bicycle races in their parking lot with all the kids from the neighborhood. I think it's really turned into, everybody was fearful of what it was gonna look like and who was gonna live there. And now it's a part of that community, and they really embrace that on both sides. So I am still open to having conversations and the questions about the programming, but I think this is a real look at, in a rural area, what does this look like in a neighborhood, and how successful can our project be?
Yeah, absolutely. Sam? Jenny, anything from your point of view?
Some of my takeaways were related to probably about half the population is on SSI or SSD, and that's their source of income. And they do pay 30% of their income toward rent. They had the One Stop for Employment come in multiple times a month, helping those that are job seeking, or the SNAP or public assistance workers come on in to assist people with their benefits if they need that. He talked a lot about being a good neighbor. like Jalen commented about the bike races and the plays and everything. And I think that is an important part of it. It's not to be in isolation. It's about how you be a good neighbor to everybody else around you. And it was really, I think, a very good look at a well-run property and what really could be for people. We often talk about, Ryan and I go back and forth about what does permanent mean, right, Ryan? Most people, out of the original 20 that have come in, most of them have already rotated out within the year because of the level of supervision. Lisa referenced independence and cooking for themselves instead of eating a congregate meal. And that holds true. They try to get to the next step so that they're not living in a place that is so supervised. So even though it's permanent and you can stay, that means we're not kicking you out unless you do some extreme damage. They've done an eviction. But people want to move on to the next step. So it gives them the time to recoup and recover and get set to move to the next step. And I think that was really important for them. I did see, I don't know if the rest of you saw in using the facilities, like they have showers available for their staff and everything that are there because of the 24/7 kind of supervision, or they're out working in the garden, or they're, trimming the hedges and things like that. So they're getting kind of dirty from outdoor work and things. So they have showers available. Staff stuff is completely separated from everybody else. And they do have their own transportation vehicle. I think they actually had 2 of them that they use to help get people to different appointments if they can't get like MAS for Medicaid transportation or a short doctor visit that MAS can't accommodate. They've helped people get to doctors and even employment interviews and things like that.
Yeah, like what they said about the transportation is they also have staff there because it's support. So they say, okay, well, you can take a bus. You don't feel comfortable taking a bus. We're going to help you take the bus a few
We'll
times
ride the bus with you.
until you're comfortable. So it's not just well, you got to do it, and if you can't do it, then it's supporting them. It's getting them back on their feet so they can do it themselves. Pat came home with the world's longest cucumber from the trip.
I got a gift.
You did get a gift.
Which was very cool. But I think from what I felt after we spent that time there is that there was a lot of, it really demonstrated, the ability that by providing the support, keeping people connected, keeps them well. Is it 100% perfect? No. However, they were able to talk about a full year by having the 24-hour access to staff, being able to support that is to walk with the person to get them where they need to be and support them, which is really what the overall intent of any kind of housing is. I think that they were also able to demonstrate to the community that has some concerns that these are your neighbors. And that this is a win-win for everybody. So, again, I thought they've done a great job. I thought they were transparent. A lot of things that they thought about how it would work out didn't, but they were flexible. They kind of kept track of what was working right, what isn't working right. So I think all in all, this really, supports our intent here.
I just have two more thoughts. One is that they had no police calls in the past year either. There was nothing that was related to danger. And then the second one, I think Ryan and I were talking about, somebody else, we were talking about offering the licensed clinical services on site. That's one of the areas we want is a secure office space so they can come on site and provide services or access telehealth. I think what's really important about the supportive housing aspect and the advocacy is that really puts your decisions on yourself. They're not there to treat you. They're not telling you, you have to engage, you have to take these medications. This is how you're going to get better. It's an advocate that isn't doing licensed counseling services for you. Therefore, all of your decisions are on yourself. They're not telling you how to fix it. They're there to assist you if you do want to fix it and open doors of opportunity of like, here's what you can do to make your symptoms better, how to engage in the community and support. So I think that's a huge aspect and the difference between that clinical level treatment and housing. And I think Pat and I are well aware too that recovery doesn't just look like, oh, if I go to counseling and take my meds, I'll be better. There are people that can engage in faith and advocacy and community engagement and retain that independence and get there. And we hope to be a part of that.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. It was kind of eye-opening, one of the comments, they said, the folks here aren't court ordered to be here, right? Like, they're here voluntarily. So, they want to be part of their solution, in their own lives. I mean, they're here to actively participate in getting better. If they didn't want to do that, or they weren't committed to changing their lives, they wouldn't choose to go there, right? And we're not gonna force anybody to go to this facility, but there are folks in our community that are looking, like Jenny said, to take that first step towards independence and kind of, getting out on their own. And that looks different for everybody. And it's clear in Lewis County and a lot of places in the North Country that first step of the rung of the ladder is not there now. So it was a great learning experience, really.
Yeah.
And there's something else that we kind of talked about, and I think this is important. One of the things that my office deals with, or myself deals with, is our residents that know that they need some sort of supportive housing unit, and they're offered that, but not in our county. And it is extremely important for most of our residents that need that level of care. That is probably one of the things that's the biggest barrier to them, and they turn that down. They want to be here. They love the county, they love the town that they are in. They have the support of their family that are rooted in here. And I just think that, just wanted to express that, I guess, that this would, again, help somebody that wants to stay here. And we all know we love this county. We love it and have the support of it, so.
Does anyone have any questions about where the process is at right now?
Where is the process right now?
Well, we're still, I think there's two other options that we're currently looking at very early stages to see if they would be able to accommodate the needs. But it's too early to, it's like, could these be for sale? Is where we're at right now. So it's not even, I think if they could be for sale, what were they for sale for? And if they could be for sale, the engineers then have to say, oh, this could be feasible, or this would not be feasible.
And we've gone down the path of looking at zoning and, what can be accommodated in different areas for zoning. And that's come up on a couple properties that have been kicked around or in high-density residential area, which doesn't allow multiple family dwelling. So, and then it gets more limiting yet again of where are possibilities that this could be and still be in a community.
Right. Because it needs to be, in order to be grant funded, access to services, to high school walkable, in order to get this funding. So I don't have any resolution or anything, just wanted to have the discussion, bring it up, talk about what we saw in Augsburg, because that was very impressive, and it really kind of highlighted how we could do that here in Mills County and really take care of this population and start to chip away at also some of the housing issues that are throughout the county.
Lisa, zoning, it's always a source of frustration for me. Maybe to clarify, Jen, you said high-density housing,
High-density residential.
which I think is the opposite. Low density would not allow.
No, it's actually, Joan and I were looking at it yesterday. Some in the town of Loudville as high-density residential or single-family houses.
That sounds like the opposite to me.
I know it would. You would think it would, but yeah.
So I think points are, and come back to something Lisa said, in Augsburg, they had some challenges and they were successful
They created a plan development.
So
Yeah.
so maybe question what the town's or village's zoning is if their language is not proper. That could be questioned, and also to follow August's footsteps, that if there's some room in the zoning or some willingness by the municipality to allow something, you know, you've got an example of where a municipality couldn't stand by its zoning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then other considerations obviously are things like infrastructure, sewer, water, electric, and the cost associated with maybe bringing them to a property that's outside of a community. How much that would cost, we all know, that's a fortune. And that chips away at how much you have to actually build a property. And the purchase price chips away with it. They were incredibly lucky, $15,000 for a school. I mean, the county just is selling Glenfield for a lot more than that.
Yeah, Obnoxious Work, they have a dedicated core group there, step by step, that really making this, their mission, and they're doing it very successfully, so it's inspiring. So, any other questions? If not, we can move on to draft resolutions. Sandra?
Appointing Ashley Wilson to the Community Services Mental Health Subcommittee to fulfill the unexpired term of Crystal Collette from September 5th through December 31st of 2024.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried.
Appropriating funds in the amount of $200,000 from fund balance into community services accounts to cover current and future care, maintenance, and examination services to patients placed in New York State Office of Mental Health psychiatric facilities pursuant to county criminal or family court orders. And I would like to point out that the draft resolution had the wrong account number on it. So the increase should be A04335000-490100, and that's professional services. The resolution that goes out in the board packet will be correct.
Thanks. Any discussion?
Did you?
Yeah, Ryan,
There was an email that went out, right? Could you explain that just a little bit?
Sure. When someone commits a crime and their defense is that they're mentally unfit for trial to face the consequences or to be taken to court by the district attorney, it is the county's responsibility to pay for that person's rehabilitation. And sometimes that rehabilitation can happen fairly quickly, maybe 6 months to a year. Other times, people may never, fully regain the competency required to face trial. A few years ago, New York State, because it's their judges and their court system that is determining whether folks can face trial or not based on competency, they used to pay 50% of this cost with us. They used to split it with us. It wasn't until I think 2019, maybe 2020, Pat, it was recently, that the state shifted that formula to 100% county funding. So we have 2 individuals right now that are under our care, trying to get rehabilitated and regain their competency so that they can face trial. And it's expensive, as you can imagine, for someone to be in a full-time facility with 24/7 mental health care. So we don't typically try to budget very steeply because some years we have none, some years we have 4. So this is why we have contingency accounts and why we keep a fund balance, because my philosophy is it would be unwise to charge the taxpayers every year for something that might only happen once every 3 years or whatever. So that's why we're taking it out of fund balance. But it's Pat's office and Pat's department that is responsible for helping these folks get placed, getting aligned with services, and then keeping in touch with the court system for when they're ready to be confident enough to face trial again.
So I think your email said, what, $1,000 a day? Roughly that figure?
1,100.
1,100?
It,
I'm saying generous.
Yeah, 1,100, I mean, it's not uncommon, we've placed people all over the state, $1,100 a day. And coincidentally, Jefferson County Board of Legislators at their last meeting just moved $700,000 out of fund balance for this exact same purpose. So it happens across the state. It's always a topic at NISAC. It's one of NISAC's top legislative priorities is to try to get the state to come back to the table, since their Office of Court Administration is partially responsible for determining, that people are incompetent, one, and two, when they are ready to be competent again. That's completely out of our control. And so we're paying the bill, but we have no ability to, move things along or seek a second opinion. It's totally the state, OCA that's making that determination.
To me, I mean, the person probably doesn't want to become competent to face the trial. I mean, everybody's working against us.
Except that they have to stay in a facility. So if they're calculated enough to decide that, then it's not likely that they're going to stay in a facility like that.
Do we have a choice, or can we shop around for facilities?
No. What happens essentially is the judge, after I have the evaluations done, those reports go to the court. The judge then determines whether or not they would like that person to do their evaluation time in a forensic unit. What happens then is that you have to wait for a bed, because there is such demand for these beds. So the person would stay incarcerated in a secure unit until the forensic unit had the bed. Office of Mental Health, and it's actually the commissioner, is the one that decides where that person goes. And essentially, it comes down to bed space. Right now, since Ryan isn't aware of this, right now the one person has been discharged, and there leaves us one that currently is in a facility. What is interesting is for that person, the evaluation was done in February. The person was not admitted until July into the forensic unit, because there's such a delay in those beds being available. We're not able, literally, once I have the evaluations done, it's back in the court, we literally are hands off until the next one comes around. So we have no input on where they go. The rates vary by facility. However, the rates are anywhere from $1,100 to $1,300, depending on the location. If it's an adolescent, you can double that. But for the grace of God, we're not going to deal with, dealing with an adolescent that needs this. And as Ryan said, in NISAC and the Conference of Local Mental Hygiene Directors have been working diligently to get this back in front of somebody to fix it. For all the reasons that you just said. We're responsible for the bill. We really have little to no say over what the outcome is or when we stay. What people also don't necessarily understand, that the person's admission to a forensic unit wouldn't necessarily be classified as treatment. Essentially, the responsibility on the forensic unit is to get that person to have the ability that they can participate in their defense. That they have the ability to work with their attorney, understand the proceedings, and make good decisions. There is a mechanism in the event that someone, after a certain amount of time, that the person does not seem restorable. And then there's another additional legal process that can be applied to, I can't think of the name of it, but to essentially kind of bring everybody back to the table and say, hey, this is not working, let's get the person where they need to be. I think that the other thing, as we've been monitoring the situation since it came up, 3 years ago, I can tell you that counties do it kind of differently in regards to where the funds come from and how the bills are paid. But I can tell you that, nobody's happy with this because A, the beds, there's a high demand for the beds, and B, it's very costly, obviously. So, does that help?
Not really, but
Yeah, I
thank you. It doesn't make me feel any better, but I feel more informed. So we don't have an option.
But we can be proactive. There is a body of evidence that says that if people are homed, that they are less likely to offend and they're more likely to go to their appointments and to take their medications and to be, part of the community. So this resolution and the next one, I feel like they're very reactionary spending. We have to spend this money because we do have people who have mental health disorders who've, gotten themselves in a bad way, and instead of, so it's nice to take all this money and spend it in preventing and getting people, back to society, so. I guess we can do something. It's
Still gonna
never
cost-
nothing.
Still gonna cost.
It's still gonna
taxpayer
cost,
money,
yes,
so-
it's still gonna cost taxpayer money.
Okay.
All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Carries.
Authorizing agreement between Lewis County Department of Social Services and to be determined for a warming center facility for the 2023-2024 Code Blue season. This bid opening is scheduled for August 22nd.
And this is what we spent last year, how much? 250.
It's closer to 3.
It's about 240,000 we spent last year. I say that, we submitted a code blue plan to OTDA. 100% of the cost of the warming center was reimbursed by OTDA. This year, they have changed the methodology from submitting a plan to the state giving every county an allocation to take care of people during the code blue season. Based on the executive orders that have been issued, it is a state responsibility. I have not received my allocation amount for this year. Last year, after submitting a plan, I didn't receive response to our plan submission until February. So they're always delayed in telling us what it is, how much we're gonna get to be able to run this.
And it has to be staffed, correct, that's the.
Warming
major part.
centers should be staffed. I would never say, just as we talked about supported housing being staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is really not safe for people to be alone in a situation like that. Either if you're in the warming center needing that assistance or you're one of the people providing the supervision. I don't believe it'd be safe to be alone. Many warming centers in the more urban areas have implemented security on site, security officers, due to problems with that. So we didn't get a high number of utilization last year. I believe it functioned as a deterrent. When we started talking with people that you haven't followed your plan for temporary assistance for us to house you through THA, temporary housing assistance, they'd say, well, you have to put me up under Code Blue. I mean, our people have learned across the state to do that. And we said, well, we now have a warming center. It opens at 7 and closes at 7. Oh, and they found another place to live. And by live, I mean they're couch surfing night to night doing that. The police brought a few people to the warming center when needed. So sometimes that happens in the middle of the night, arraignments and other things. Sometimes there's orders of protection issued in the middle of the night. And the person has no place to go. Now we have the warming center available so they can kind of get their feet on the ground. I think of note, we talked about step by step a lot in peers. Our warming center was staffed predominantly with peers. These were people that have come through our system and experienced some homelessness. So they have that lived and learned experience to try to help people along the way. And they helped them with SNAP applications and EAP applications and send them to DSS and talk to them about what do you need to do, kind of change the course, change your direction so you can be housed and not have to come to a warming center every night. So we went out for bid this time to see if there was any changes in costs related to, especially the rent. Staffing's an expensive
cost.
Didn't we use churches last year?
We did, but we did pay rent to the Church of the Nazarene, and I give them just tons of credit, and Pastor Nate for kind of stepping up, saying, we'll be the ones to try this. We had a great experience with the Church of the Nazarene. But it's just a smidge out of town, right, to walk in winter. I don't know if we'll have anybody else. I know the Church of the Nazarene is still interested. I don't know what bids, if anything, have come in yet at this point.
So Jenny, when you say you haven't really defined the utilization of it, do you have some kind of a guess of how many people use it?
We had 19 people use it last year.
19 people use it. So if we were to build this housing, would that alleviate some of the pressure on the warming center?
It possibly could. We've actually talked about a way to try to embed the warming center right into a flex space in the supported housing unit. So then it would be, there'd already be 24-hour staffing there, and we could kind of build off some of that structure that's already available to reduce costs of that. So I think we're trying to solve a lot of problems with one building, but I think that's a good opportunity to put that together.
Any other discussion, questions? All those in favor, aye? Opposed, nay? Carries.
Authorizing agreements between Lewis County Department of Social Services and various foster care agencies from January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2025.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye? Opposed, nay? Carries. I do not have any motions or executive session. So I will make a motion to adjourn. If I can get a second. Good timing.
That was if Tom were here, he would tell you to keep it short, so I'm gonna sit in for Tom on that.
Well, Tom's not here, so my limit must be longer.
Don't want to question, Brian.
I think it's Bill's was shorter.
So actually, this is relatively quick. Two things. One, we're going into budget season, so I want to give you an update because this is actually kind of a unique budget year. And two, number 4 on our goals for the Finance and Rules Committee was to establish new long-term financial sustainability goals. We have not addressed that yet, and I'd like to make a suggestion. Eric and I have some ideas about what those new goals could be. So, starting out, just a reminder. I do something wrong.
Try to.
There we go. Just a reminder about our budget process. Eric and I have begun meeting with department heads. So far, just the 2 clerks, the Mosers we've met with, but we've got a bunch more later this week. That happens through August and September. Back at the next committee meeting in September, I'll be here to discuss the preliminary budget issues. Really, the 2 largest anchors in our budget are personnel and capital, so we'll go over those next month. October 17th will be our budget workshop this year. The tentative budget will be presented to the board at our November 7th board meeting. And then that date, November 28th, is wrong. It's looking like we might be November 21st for the budget hearing. So more information on that. We don't have our end of the year schedule hammered out yet. So what you've got in front of you is reflective of this graph here. The basis of our budget is property tax. Property tax is determined by the levy amount that we need in comparison to the full taxable value of all property in Lewis County. What you'll notice here is something that is quite unusual. Eric's been doing this a lot more years than I have, but municipal finances, this is my 10th municipal budget. I've never seen anything like this. A 1-year jump of 15.8%. Our taxable value last year that we based the budget on was $2,493,529,000. Our taxable value for this year will be $2,887,365,000. Like I said, in nearly 16% year-over-year increase. So what does that look like? It's different in each town. It's not just due to revaluations, okay? Real estate prices have been going up steeply and our assessments are catching up. You've got this sheet in front of you so that you can look at it. Before we get into talking about tax rates and what that will look like next year, Candy and Eric and I talked last week. We're going to do something a little different this year because certainly the rate is going to go down. But what we want to talk about is what each bill will look like in each town. And we want to give you a bit more in-depth analysis on that because, for example, Krogan, their equalization rate is now only down to 47.5. There's barely anything we're going to be able to do to prevent their tax bill from going up. So it's frustrating when you read in the news that the county reduced taxes 10% and your bill comes in and it's more. Well, that's because they haven't done a reevaluation in, I don't know, 25 years, maybe 20 years. So, this just gives you an idea, and we're going to provide that analysis this year, which is something new that we haven't done in the past, but I think it'll be valuable this year. So what's going on? This is off the Federal Reserve website. Nationally, real estate prices have gone up 52.5% since 2018. So the fact that we are up in Lewis County 34% since 2018, I mean, it seems like a good context to talk about. We're not, Phoenix, Arizona, we're not Orlando, Florida, right? We're not Westchester County or Nassau. So we're lagging behind the national trend, but still 34% over 5 years is still significant. If we were growing at the national rate, our taxable value would be 3.2 billion, not 2.8. So just an idea of some context. Some additional context. Lewis County is growing, not fast, but we do have growth. We have issued over 3,000 building permits. This excludes Leiden and Lionsdale, for which we do not do building permits. But 3,086 permits over the last we don't have 2023, but this is 18 to 22. That's $233 million of value that have been added. So if you're looking to kind of account for, why our base is growing, part of it is real estate prices are going up. Part of it is natural growth. An interesting thing that stood out to me on this, new residential, that's new homes, okay? 454 permits for new residential over 4 years. That was more than I would have expected, quite honestly. Residential improvements are things like garages, additions, decks, fences, those types of things. And then commercial, of course, is commercial. Sales tax, just an update on that, since we're talking big picture finances, continues to be strong. Last year, we brought in $18.2 million in sales tax. This year, we've got 10.2 that have come in already, and we're about 55-60% through the sales tax collection year. So, and then we obviously don't have the holidays yet. So you can expect that to probably hit similar numbers as last year. Phil's usually pretty straight on with his predictions. So here are our old financial goals established in 2015. Pretty good, actually. Maintain a minimum fund balance of 10% of county and hospital operations. So if you take our budget of $60 million, you take the hospital's budget of $80 million, combine those to $140 million. If we had 10% on hand, that would be a target of $14 million. Today, we're sitting obviously above that. Maintain an A+ credit rating, good goal. Maintain current county service levels and reduce budgeted fund balance to 0. So every year we use a bit of fund balance in order to balance that final levy amount. Last year, I believe it was $1.8 million that we used. When I first started, it was around $2 million, so we've brought it down a little bit. It is not my recommendation that we continue that goal. One, it's been nearly 10 years and we haven't hit it. And two, fund balance usage is like the ballast in a ship, I think. We could get it to 0, and then you'd just be, that levy would be changing every year based on your different needs. Using fund balance properly is a way to keep your tax rate steady. So I wouldn't actually recommend trying to get it to 0, because one year you do a lot of capital projects, your rate goes up. The next year you don't, your rate goes down. It's better for the taxpayers to be consistent. And so that's why I'm not recommending.
Times were much different then.
Yeah, fair. So proposed 2023 fiscal goals. This is just what Eric and I have chatted and come up with. There's no resolution in your packet to adopt these. It's just an initial discussion on what we could put into place. So, county maintain a fund balance between 10 and 30% of annual operations, just our operations. So if our operations are $60 million a year, that means our target fund balance right now would be between, that's incorrect. 6 million and, what's 30% of 60? 18 million. And then, so you can see where we are currently. And then separately, we have Lewis County Health System maintain a fund balance of at least 16% of annual operations. So their current operations are $80 million. Their target is 13 million, and they currently have 17 million. And they have already adopted this policy in 2018. A lot of you guys were here, you remember that discussion. No, 16% is 2 months out of 12. So 2 months of operating costs out of 12. It's up 16.6 or whatever, but it's roughly $13 million. So that would be what I would say for our fund balance policy, between 6 million and 16 million for us, and then the hospital maintaining their target of 16%, around 13 million, would be more than sufficient. Credit rating, maintain an A+ credit rating is a great goal, something that we have done, we have maintained. I will note, however, that credit ratings across the country for municipal governments are being downgraded to no fault of the municipality. There are parts of this country, upstate New York included, that do not have potentially the best economic future. And credit rating agencies are downgrading those bonds for those communities, even though they've done all the right things. It's partially based on economic outlook and things we can't control. But still, maintaining an A+ is a great goal. Here's a new one, invest at least 3% of operating budget into capital equipment and projects. We did not do that in the past. And we had a situation where nearly all of our buildings and a lot of our equipment was in very bad shape. Yes, it's a luxury. To Phil's point before, times were different in the past. But as long as we can afford to invest in our capital and our physical plant, we need to do that so that we do not get behind and put ourselves in a situation where we've got to have, all of these major investments at once. The last one is regarding debt. Maintain a debt ratio no greater than 50% of our constitutional limit. The constitutional limit is a formula set by the comptroller's office. In our last audit, that limit was placed at $163 million. We're currently at $56 million of debt, so we're at $34 million. 82 million would be 50%. So we've obviously got quite a bit of breathing room for more debt. Not that we have any plans to take on any more debt, but I think kind of putting that parameter in place regarding debt would be a wise thing to consider. So I believe that's pretty much it. Thoughts, questions, discussion on these objectives, and do we feel they're appropriate? Should we put it in a new resolution, or do you want to have more discussion? I turn that back over to you, Phil.
Well, personally, I'd like to think about it a little bit more, but
sure.
But also put it in a resolution at some point. What do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is gonna be something to stand by, it should be in a resolution. I struggle with equalization rate. You know, we keep saying how we have not raised taxes in the last 10 years. But like you were saying, a lot of us are getting bills that are higher than the previous year. And it's hard to explain to the constituents how we have not increased taxes and yet their tax bill is higher.
Right. So what we can control is the tax rate and the levy. And the rate and the levy are directly proportional to one another. Towns, however, control assessed value, okay? So equalization is a tool which is applied by the state so that towns and villages that don't want to increase their residents' assessments can't allow those residents to pay less to county and school districts that cover multiple jurisdictions. So if the town of Krogan, I'll just pick on them because they haven't done one in a long time. If the town of Krogan says your house is worth $80,000, but the one next door to you just sold for $160,000, you don't get to pay the county's rate at $80,000 worth of property because you would be getting a discount on all of the county services provided compared to the town of Lowville, which keeps their assessment at 100%. Okay. So the state actually applies an equalization rate, which does exactly what it says. It equalizes across the board. So if your house is assessed for $60,000 or $80,000 in this scenario, we would apply the equalization rate so that the rate from the county goes up so that you're paying your fair share. Same with school districts because they cover multiple jurisdictions, right? Otherwise, one jurisdiction could, on behalf of their taxpayers, just keep their assessments low so that they don't have to pay their fair share. So there's a lot of our towns, if you go back. I mean, Katie and I were talking about Fort Pinckney. They just did a reevaluation. They've tried to stay on top of it and they're already down to 81%. So, when the trends are going up quickly, it's hard to stay at 100%. So that's part of it. And another part of it is we say our rate is going down, and that's true, but our levy has consistently gone up, right? So the amount of money that we need from the taxpayers goes up, but the value of their property has gone up as well. So it's usually proportional, and when we're doing it well, it's proportional in a way that allows the rate to go down.
In your crystal ball, what rate do you think we'll have compared to previous years, way back?
The spreadsheet that Eric and I have goes back to 2008. I don't know why, other than we've started in 2018, and I probably asked for a 10-year look back then. So we could look back further than that, but I think we'll be the lowest we've been since 2008. So probably lowest in 20 years. But we have not met with every department. There's a lot of commitments out there. I think it would be too early to make
I
any
was
strong
just asking
commitments.
for general.
I think a few things for you to think about as we, key drivers as we work through the budget. And again, as Ryan just said, too early for us to have numbers together yet, but our property tax collection we are allowed to go up 2% by state law. We've done that calculation. It's going to be in about the $600,000 range. So do we use that entire amount? As Ryan said, we can control that amount. We can control the rate. So that's something to think about. The other big driver, as Ryan's talked about, is that increase in value. That it is what it is. I mean, that's the number we're going to use. That's a big factor. And then the other thing to think about is the sales tax collection. We've historically been very conservative in our budgeting. We've seen the trend. As long as there's not some major decrease in sales tax collection, we should think about how conservative or aggressive we want to be. Because if we have $3 or $4 million in excess sales tax every year, that fund balance, is going to stay very healthy. So, that's something that is a key consideration as we move forward with the rest of the budget.
Well, obviously, in the sales tax this year, the budget was increased, and we're still
Yes.
gonna be substantially over by the end of the year.
Right.
And that's a good thing, but that, we need to be thinking about what we want to do with that as an exception, not as a rule of the excess. In my thinking, there's got to be one-time things that we should consider, I believe, with that.
Yeah, I think you're talking, Phil, about what, do we use some of that funds for one-time things?
Yes.
That's a question. I think the other question that, as far as our budget planning for next year is, where do we place that budget for next year?
There's two
different
issues to that. But where we use that one-time thing would affect what we would project for next year as well. And I think I expressed to Ryan the thought that maybe we should pay down debt with it at some point, like the old courthouse, for instance. But we can worry about that in a little bit, but at least think about it, okay?
Well, the problem there is that old debt has a low interest rate.
I understand that, but it is debt,
Money
and
that 3.3+1 is driving.
Ryan and I argue about that just about every time. But it is debt, and
Understood.
for one-time use with extra funds, it's nice to get rid of debt. Us old people think about that a lot, Okay.
I didn't say anything.
Young people don't. Anyway,
I would agree with you, Phil. I mean, pay off debt is, you're talking about the future of the county.
right.
Although I understand your thought that interest rates are low on the debt, we can, two ways of looking at it.
There's definitely two ways to look at it.
Because right now, you're using the money you could be paying off debt and investing it to make more money.
If you can get 4% off your investments and our annual debt service is 3%,
You're making a
Away
percent.
from
what money is,
investing the money rather than paying debt.
I wish I hadn't said that, Jessica. No, that's a very good point.
Well, only right now because interest rates are high, but.
my only comment on debt and that is that, my philosophy is that governments are not like a household, they're not like a small business. We should be looking in terms of 50, 75, 100 years and making decisions, financial decisions that way. So, but if that is a value of the work, paying down debt, we certainly can afford to do it. No doubt about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So one comment on sales tax. Every year I've kind of given us warning speech about how we don't want to be too aggressive on sales tax. We don't want to be the ones in the newspaper that didn't reach their sales tax budget. There's always, we know the article every year, there's 2 cities that tend to ride the razor's edge.
I know what you're talking about.
But, you know, we might want to start thinking about that calculus a little differently. Maybe we, because we have decent fund balance and we're not really looking to continue to grow it, maybe we do want to, you know, the risk calculus changes a little bit, where it would be better to undershoot or, you know, over project and then have to take a little out of fund balance rather than continue to undershoot and continue to build this fund balance. You know what I'm saying? So we might want to be more aggressive in terms of, you know, what is the risk, right? The risk that we're continuing to build that we don't need, or that we fall short when we've got plenty in the bank to cover for it. So we might want to be significantly more aggressive. I mean, we've tried to be more aggressive and we still haven't come close.
When you're significantly more aggressive, then that, in raising the budgeted amount, then that lowers the tax rate more. And
Sure. Exactly.
and that is a fear that we have of a big increase in the future.
Yep, good point.
So there's a.
This would be
Give
the
and
first,
take
so here's an interesting one, Phil. Look at that, 18.25 is the sales tax we got last year. What was our levy last year? 18.2,
18,
right?
actually about 18.6, 18.7.
So for the first time ever in the history, as far as I know, in Lewis County, we're getting as much from our sales tax as we are from our levy. One source that we can control, our levy, and 50% that we cannot control. So that is something to think about, is, you know, you start relying too much on sales tax and there is a economic downturn. You know, the worst we've had, you know, since Eric and I have been looking back is 2009 to 2010, our sales tax went down 10%. So, you know, that would be $1.8 million compared to last year. So, you know, your levy's that's not gonna happen to your levy because we control the levy, right? So, you know, that is a risk factor.
Well, you know, one thing on that 2015, if you saw, about the use of fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
That was hiding, we were using too much fund balance. And that had a tendency to hide actual cost.
Yep, you can.
And that had to be, that's why that was put in there.
Yep, fair.
Anyway.
No, that's a good point.
There's several things, and you're doing good on it. Good thing Eric's here.
At least one old guy.
I almost thought you were gonna leave it at that. You caught yourself at the last.
Yeah, I caught myself just in time. Anything else you want to talk, anybody got any other
Could
questions?
you go back to the chart for the assessment value?
This one or this one?
I'll go back, you had it. So one thing that really jumps out that I've been following the last 3 to 4 years, you look at your top 3, which would be Montague, Osceola, and Pigman. Those townships, what do they have to offer?
They're all about recreation.
Is recreational. And as we discussed earlier, the General Service Committee, following the rails to trail, is everyone wants to be outdoors, doing recreational activities. And those are your 3 streaming townships that are booming right now. There's 450-ish residential homes with building permits. I would have to say a third of those are probably in these townships, which people are buying, building, they're paying into the town tax, and they don't use the same services as we all do as we're year-round residents. They do contribute, but those numbers are, I think, you'll continue to see that in the next 3 to 5 years.
I think if you could summarize kind of our theory in Lewis County, you know, over the last several years, has been the best way to reduce taxes is to focus on growing the base rather than focus on trying to make cuts. You can cut a $60 million budget 20% and only save $20 million, right? $30 million. If your base grows by 100 million, that's what really, 200 million, 300 million, that's what really is going to drive your rate down, is base growth, not controlling the small amount of costs that we really can through operations. And not that we need to be crazy with our operations, but, you know, the focus should be on, you know, growing that denominator, so that the rate ultimately goes down.
To piggyback on what Josh said, my family lives in one of those townships, and you wouldn't believe the number of new houses and structures being built up there. And we all know what snowmobile season is. It's now happening all summer long too. The side-by-side traffic has gone astronomically up there to where our snowmobile season isn't as daunting as we used to think it was, because now it's a year-round season, or getting close to it at least. It's a lot.
And here's another tidbit to that, back to sales tax. It was just at a treasurer's conference, and NICEAG always reviews sales tax data, and just a huge factor, we all know it, was the internet sales tax, the law changed in 2019. We're starting to see how incredible that impact was. If somebody built a second home here, they're not gonna go shop at Wegmans in Syracuse. They might be ordering something and having it delivered to their second home in the town of Pinckney, and that sales tax comes here. So that online sales tax is a huge driver for us. It is for every county, but I think the second homes has even more impact maybe in a place like this.
That was a big turning point. You're right.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. When was the Supreme Court case? 2020, right? 2019, 2020?
2019, it went into impact.
Yeah.
Into effect.
So, you know, that really.
Late 2019.
Well, I think part of the reason was here, I don't think anyone recognized the amount of online shopping was actually being done, because of the remoteness for the, for the residents here would have to drive 40 or 100 miles to go to Watertown, in my case. So probably the percentage that's bought online is higher in Lewis County than it would be in urban area.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Particularly wintertime.
The NICEAG, when we've looked at the countywide sales tax at the conferences and whatnot, you know, county by county, the rural ones have popped far more than it's actually the online sales has been at the expense of brick and mortar in many ways. You know, you may have driven to Watertown or Syracuse in the past, now you order online, that revenue stays with us.
Oh, good point, yeah.
And one thing I'll add is these 450 new additional residential homes that are seasonal, I'm not saying they are seasonal, but a large amount of them are seasonal. They're employing and having contracts with local contractors, and they're buying local, they're buying the material local. So our contractors that are local, they're building these new residential homes that are in the town of Pinckney, Montague, Osceola, and they're buying all their supplies local. So it's a domino effect, it's a compounding effect, and it's a good number. It just contributes to everything as a whole.
It's an extrapolation causation correlation does not mean causation, but think about this. Our population has gone down, right? But our building permits have gone up. So does that necessarily mean that these are second homes? No, but it's a strong indication that a large percentage are probably not full-time residents.
Take a look at the school enrollment.
Right.
That's another.
Are you done?
No.
All the questions that follow.
Let's do it.
Authorizing one-year renewal agreements between the County of Lewis and ICU Security and Private Investigations for unarmed security guard services at the DMV at an hourly rate of $33.50 from 8:30 a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. And social services building at an hourly rate of $36.50 from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Establishing and adopting information security policies.
Any comments on that, Ryan?
this is a slate of policies that were recommended by the Department of Homeland Security as well as some other security consultants that we've brought in. Connor and his team worked really hard to pull these policies together. And then they even bought us lunch and had a bunch of the administrative team and some department heads go through the policies line by line to make sure that they, you know, there was no legal other problems with them. So we vetted them. It's stuff that probably should have been in place, you know, for some time now. Things like password management, things like sensitive data. We're now going to have a very mini version of a classified document type system, right? So, you know, there are different IT restrictions put on different levels of sensitive data, and we need to handle those differently. So things like that, and also establishing a protocol for phishing emails and trying to hold employees, you know, kind of accountable for some of the trouble they might get in online. As Connor has said many times to this group, our weakest security checkpoint of all is not our firewall, it's not, you know, hackers from the outside. The weakest point is our users that could let something in. So this is kind of trying to control that.
You don't feel it's too invasive?
I did it first, but as they explained each one to me, they made sense. I mean, we've got a lot of sensitive data. You know, we've got people's employment information, income information, tax information, you know, not to mention medical information. You know, that makes us vulnerable to, you know, folks that would want to misuse that. So I do think that it's appropriate and recommended by the Department of Homeland Security, who, as you guys know, were already here once this year with a potential breach. So.
And you're all right with the legalities of all that?
I am, and I do think it's worth us having our users pay a bit more attention to this, because we will be able to secure our documents, less likely to be sued by the state or Medicaid for disclosing medical information, which can be pretty hefty fines. So I think it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a pain in the neck. I know, except for Larry, who's very excited about a 5-factor system, I think. But it's necessary in this day and age. That's the bottom line.
I would say that we softened, you know, Caitlin, Joe, and I softened some of the language, but overall, it's good to implement.
You're shaking your head, Caitlin, you're okay? Okay, and so this would go into effect at, when do you think you implement?
As soon as it's adopted by the board, so September 5th.
You start right away then? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Awarding bid and authorizing contract between the County of Lewis and Cloud Permit Software to provide permitting community development software at a cost of $47,900 for the first year and $44,000 for years 2 through 5, commencing on September 1st, 2023.
You said this was budgeted, right?
Yes. It was a capital project to stand it up the first year. Going forward, it will have to be an operational expense. But what this does is allow all agencies that issue permits will be able to use this system, particularly codes, where right now it's all paper and you still have to come in to see them. This will be an online system for people to do their building code permits and pay them online and all that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Rolling.
Authorizing county participation in expense sharing and tax assessment legal challenges by Erie Boulevard Hydropower and Lakeside Beaver Falls LLC against Town of Krogan and Board of Assessment Review by having the county attorney represent the county and appear in the 2 separate pending tax assessment challenges for the 2023 tax year, and to have the county execute an expense sharing agreement with the other taxing jurisdictions affected, whereby the county will pay 1/3 of the expert fees and the county's pro rata share of any refunds determined to be owed in the matter.
This is our norm, right, John?
Yes, in fact, we passed the board by a resolution in 2019 or 20, passed a policy where we would join on to these tax assessment challenges where the assessment is reduced by at least $1 million or something like that. I forget what all the criteria are. And in fact, the town of Cogan, we sent in a letter requesting that we join in. They've already started and hired the appraiser on the Erie Boulevard Hydro, which is a $10 million drop that they're looking for. So,
That'll be a mistake.
we, we have agreed in the past to join with the towns and the school districts to do that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, John requested it through his board. Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed?
Authorizing agreement between the County of Lewis and 3+1 LLC to provide liquidity, treasury analysis, management data, and programming outlines in its Cash Fest program at an annual cost of $17,775.
Brian, can you briefly explain this?
This is our relationship with 3+1 right there, we're just renewing it.
Yes.
So we talked earlier about how we've been getting more successful, measurably more successful with our, investing our fund balance. And the company that's helped us do that has been this Cash Fest, so we're re-upping with them.
And the return justifies the expense.
A couple more comments. You can't say that 3+1 has convinced the Fed to increase the interest rates. So they certainly don't get credit for the large increase in interest rates. The return we're getting on our money today is, I don't have a number in front of me, but the interest income compared to 3 or 4 years ago it's going to be up 4 or 5 times, because
This is paying for itself.
absolutely, in my opinion, yes. I mean, again, the interest income certainly pays for it, but I just think the value of their services is well worth it. We finished 3 years with them. We actively work with them. We talk with them on a quarterly basis for a meeting and then regular emails and conversations. We are so much more active in our investment of funds and treasury bills, CDs, et cetera, and it's their guidance that has gotten us there. From the County Treasurers Association last week, I think there's 30 or more counties that are now working with them in New York State. And one of the other treasurers' comments was if you're not using 3+1, you should be. So very valuable service.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, anything else been brought up?
We need an executive session.
Yeah, we need an executive session to address the General Services Committee about personnel matters, and also Caitlin and I would like to bring the board up on the committee on the status of union negotiations.
I'll make the motion. We go into executive session.
Anything gonna be after?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay, I'll be in the conference room if you can hear that.
We have a second.
Will you be sure?
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, we're in executive session.